So let me get this straight with you guys. Hazel Scott was known as the greatest pianist alive, but they tried to make sure you never knew her name. But we're about to do a little something about that right now. Real talk, Hazel Dorothy Scott wasn't just a prodigy, she was a straight-up legend. She was born in Trinidad in 1920, and after immigrating from Trinidad, she was raised in Harlem, where she became known as the little girl pianist, playing in churches across Harlem. And before most kids were trying to tie their shoes, she had that next level fire that made audiences lose their minds. This girl was bending rules and impressing people, so much so that her mother took her to Juilliard School of Music for an audition. She walked in and played Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. Then the head of Juilliard was so impressed that he says, "I am in the presence of the genius." Remember that she was only 8 years old and got accepted when the official age was 16. Man, that's beast mode talent right there. She soaked up everything around her: classical precision, jazz rhythm, blues soul, and cooked it all into something fresh. Then at 18 came a point where she played as an intermission pianist at the Yacht Club on 52nd Street. This is where Hazel became frustrated that every song she tried to play was rejected by staff because they claimed that the head act, Francis Faye, was planning to do the same songs in her repertoire. So Hazel had to quickly figure out a way out of that. So she just took the classics and put a little swing on them. She made Bach jazzy, Chopin with a groove. Rachmaninoff became hip with her improv. From then on, she became famous for the swinging classics: straight fire, untouchable, and unmatched. And just when you thought you had seen it all, Hazel would sit at not one, but two pianos and play them simultaneously. Freaky fingers. Nah, this was a showstopper. Hands flying, two different parts, two different rhythms, pure boss level mastery. Man, the people back then went nuts. And even today, this is amazing. Then there was Cafe Society, the first integrated nightclub in New York. In 1939, the headliner Billie Holiday left, deliberately creating an opening for Hazel Scott, who became the darling favorite at the club.
She said, "Hire Hazel Scott." And the owner said, "Who's Hazel Scott?" She said, "Don't ask questions, just hire her."
Gabriel the born, some early morn, we'll hear his horn.
This lady was getting paid $1,500 a week, becoming one of the highest paid black entertainers of her time. She had the money, the style, and the power, and she never let it go to waste. The next year, Hazel records her first solo album, featuring her Cafe Society repertoire, Swinging the Classics. It's a huge success, breaking music industry sales records. By 1942, Hazel Scott was now getting into acting, but she laid out conditions for her movie career, saying she would not appear in any role demeaning to her race, and if the wardrobe that was provided was not flattering, she was going to wear her own clothes. Her first film was called Something to Shout About, but by the next year, she would do her most iconic film called The Heat Is On.
Attention, let's boogie woogie.
But it would also be the last of her short-lived acting career. Yeah, because during the shoot, there was a scene where black female dancers were supposed to see their husbands off to war. But Hazel noticed that the directors had changed their pristine look and dressed the black women in dirty aprons, making them look raggedy and deprived. So Hazel staged a 3-day strike until the costumes were changed back. The company tried to hold out, but eventually they caved in. But this on-set dispute also resulted in the end of Hazel's film career altogether. And now Hollywood was determined to blackball her. A little time would pass by. Then in 1945, Hazel met and married Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr., forming a true power couple. But she would have to agree to give up nightclubs for life on the concert stage because Powell was heavily into the church. Those two eventually had a son, Adam Clayton Powell III, and continued to balance life, love, and principles. Hazel's contract also now stated that she would not perform before a segregated audience anywhere. She said it was ridiculous for a person to want to see her sing while not be willing to sit next to someone who looked like her. And that's how Hazel kept it real. And it was noticed too. Martin Luther King later told her that the first time he ever sat in a non-segregated audience in the South was at one of her concerts.
Hello there. I'm Hazel Scott.
Now, in 1950, was the real breakthrough year. Hazel Scott hosted her own national TV show, the first black woman to ever do so. This was a full 4 years before Oprah Winfrey was even born. So 3 nights a week, Hazel brought jazz, blues, and classical to the masses, decades before Oprah ever thought of having a show. Hazel was a total game changer. But the same year, the Red Scare about communism hit, and Hazel's name appeared in the blacklist pamphlet by the FBI called Red Channels. While other people that were accused got scared, Hazel boldly walked into a congressional hearing and defended herself, standing tall, savage, untouchable. But with all that, it wouldn't be enough. Just 1 week later, sponsors started pulling out, and her show was gone, and her career in America was erased overnight. Fear and politics tried to bury this extraordinary lady. Then 7 years later, her marriage was ending. That's when Hazel moved to Paris in 1957, joining the black expatriate scene alongside James Baldwin and Josephine Baker. And she also found love again, marrying a Swiss-born comedian named Ezio Bedin.
Si tendrement on s'est aimé, si tendrement.
She kept performing, touring Europe, and staying luminous while her homeland forgot her. But that venture would eventually dry up. She was now suffering financially. Kind of like many of the jazz musicians of that era, she found the times had moved on. So then she tried to return to the U.S. in the late 1960s, but Hazel's superstardom had faded. It was like no one remembered her fame and accomplishments. But her fire remained. She performed alongside old friends like Dizzy Gillespie, still commanding the keys with that legendary touch. Later in 1979, Hazel records 3 albums in quick succession, Always, Afterthoughts, and After Hours. But this would be her last major outing. A few years later in 1981, Hazel was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and unfortunately, Scott would pass away a month later on October 2nd, 1981. Yeah, even in her final moments, music surrounded her. Dizzy Gillespie played a muted trumpet at her bedside, a perfect final note for a life lived with soul, style, and courage. Man, the world had tried to erase her because they couldn't handle this woman of color who had brains, beauty, and raw talent to outplay everybody. Hazel Scott used her soul power to stand for what she believed in, and nothing could take that away. Yeah, they may have tried, but the real history book doesn't forget legends. Hazel Scott was the greatest at what she did on a piano, and her life story is important, and we put her name back where it belongs, on another level, untouchable, and unforgettable. Hey guys, I hope you guys appreciate that. These are the type of stories that we've got to tell on the Music Mindset channel. I'm Mr. Mindset, and I thank you for watching. Check you out next time.